So you play at masses?
I played 3 today, slowly earning my place in paradise.
Ah, good for you.
The first person in the SWAT team who breaks in the door, he basically gets shot to death. And then you have the 2-3 others that come in later who are the heroes. If you're competing, you're actually just not unique enough. Then you're just trying to compete with others who are already doing more or less the same thing. But you should be really somewhere where you don't have any competition at all.
Welcome to Vida Brevis, a podcast about business, art, life, and death. I'm your host, Carlos Cardenas. Here we explore how business, creativity, and philanthropy intersect through the lives of remarkable people. I talk with entrepreneurs and community leaders who are passionate collectors and visionary patrons to discover how art shapes their work, purpose, and legacy. Because life is short, but art is forever.
Chers amis, queridos amigos, and dearest friends of the pod. Over a decade ago in Paris, I met an art collector named Hampus Lindwall. At the time, I knew him purely as a contemporary art collector, and a very specific kind of collector, focused on digital, internet, and net art. Generally speaking, really edgy stuff. Then came the first twist. His day job wasn't in tech or finance. He was a church organist. Since 2005, he has held a prestigious post of the organiste titulaire at the Church of Saint-Esprit in the 12th arrondissement of Paris, playing Mass every Sunday beneath some of the most significant interwar frescoes in France. Then came a second, even bigger twist. Hampus isn't maintaining a classical tradition. He's dismantling and rebuilding it from the inside out. He views the pipe organ not as a dusty relic, but as a massive, ancient acoustic synthesizer. Among many other places, he has performed at the Berlin Philharmonic, one of the most prestigious concert halls on earth. And somehow, that is not even the most surprising thing about him. He brings organ-playing robots into the nave. He co-curates sold-out concert series at the church alongside Stephen O'Malley, the legendary guitarist and composer behind the drone metal collective Sun, a series that has become one of Paris's most vital and unexpected platforms for experimental music, filling the church with drone metal, electronic noise, and contemporary soundscapes that would make most priests nervous. Most of his priests, it turns out, just love it. He collaborates with the visual artist Cory Arcangel, orchestrating live performances that have toured from London to Dusseldorf, and his recent solo album, Brace for Impact, documents where all of this has led. In our conversation today, Hampus breaks down how he built a truly unique career at the intersection of high and low culture, from 90s MTV and Swedish production studios to classical conservatories and avant-garde net art. We unpack why traditional institutions operate on a 30 to 50-year delay, how physical constraints force radical innovation, and why his core rule for any field is simple. If you are competing, you're just not being unique enough. This is a masterclass in finding the future by mining the past, leaning into radical discomfort, and carving out a space where you have zero competition. Here's my conversation with Mr. Hampus Lindwall. Where are you? You're not at the church, are you?
I'm in the church, yeah.
You're kidding. Amazing.
Just finished Mass and now I'm here. It's kind of nice in the evening because it's very calm and also there's no echo because it's so vast, the church, so you don't hear anything of the sound, it's like being outside basically.
Remind me what church that is?
It's called Saint-Esprit and it's in the 12th arrondissement in Paris. It's a very interesting church. I've been working here since 2005. It was built in the beginning of the 20th century and it's one of the first larger structures, so to say, with reinforced concrete as material. And the architect was Paul Tournon, which was one of the big shots at the time. And the church is decorated by some of the most interesting artists actually from that time also in France. So we have the biggest fresco by Maurice Denis. We also have The Way of the Cross by Georges de Vallière. and a bunch of other people. So it's like a period in French art history that has been overlooked, but now people start to also get interested in this. And this is in the church, we have around 60, maybe 70 artists who has worked in the church. So this makes this the biggest ensemble of between the war paintings in France.
That's just unbelievable. And your title is you are like the organist in residence, is that right?
Yeah, in France they say organiste titulaire. It doesn't make any sense, I think, like titular organist in English, but why not? That's the jam.
So you play at masses?
Yeah.
You play services?
I played 3 today. Slowly earning my place in paradise.
Ah, good for you. That's wonderful. Wonderful. So, it's truly amazing. I mean, I've known you for many years, and I knew that you were an organist, but I had no idea like the sort of depth of your activity because now I'm learning that you were organizing kind of like musical programming at this church, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit more about, I mean, obviously you're much more than an organ player.
Definitely. So here in this church, when I came here, as I said, this is a very large church. It's actually, I think, the 3rd or 4th biggest church in Paris. So it's really massive. So this size of churches, they would normally have 2 organs. 1 organ to accompany the choir, and then 1 large instrument that would be for the different pieces during the liturgy. But since the economy was how it was, during the 30s, they only built the small organ to accompany the choir. And that is still today the only instrument we have. So I actively started to work on building or bringing a bigger organ to the church when I came here, which was a project that has been in the making since the church was done, but it always failed because of funding. So I started to have a series of organ concerts, and we weren't that successful with this because the instrument is quite small. And but I did, however, through this manage to unite a small group with people from the neighborhood who became like an organ association who helped me with the project of the big organ. And once I had these people around me, a number of years ago, started a series called Les Inspirations Visibles, together with Stephen O'Malley from Sun, but he's doing a lot of things as a guitar player, as an artist, composer, everything. And he's also based in Paris. And we thought there was a gap a bit in Paris between the contemporary music series that you would get in the Philharmonie or in the Radio House or something, and the experimental stuff in a suburb, where you will go to some garage and you will hear people experiment, like banging on whatever they can find, basically.
Yeah.
So we thought there's so much things in between, and there is no real spot for it in Paris. So we invited a collective from Berlin who was here playing, and we had already, I think, the first concert, like 200 people coming. We thought, wow, that's pretty wild for such a underground initiative. And then next concert, the double that. After this, we had to start putting limits because we get so much people. We sometimes have to have 2 nights in a row because we had, for instance, Kali Malone had new piece she presented, and we had to do 2 nights because we just can't host enough. We don't have enough space, actually. So there was definitely a need for this in Paris, I would say.
And is it like regular programming?
Well, I mean, we are both very busy with other things, and we do this just really because we love it. So we try to do 3, 4, 5 per year.
Yeah. And what is the role of the church in all of this? I mean, this is in the nave, this is in the cathedral there. So are they involved in any way, shape, or form?
Not really. They're just generous enough to give us the church for free to do these things. And I think in the beginning, they didn't really know what to expect. But now the priests usually show up to the concerts and they really like it. And they're also very happy to see that it's a very different public also coming to the church compared to the masses or many other things happenings.
Yeah, it's just incredible. It reminds me that there's a church, I want to say in the 13th arrondissement, more contemporary.
Yeah.
I forget what it's called, but there was an area where I guess like the priest or one of the head priests at this church was a fan of contemporary art,
Okay.
and he put on shows.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like Claude Levesque had a show there.
Crazy.
And yeah, Guillaume Constantin's another friend of mine. He had a show there.
Huh.
And yeah, and there's also the cathedral. I don't know what it's called. That's not far from Les Halles. And
Yeah.
I want to say that there's remind me the name of the Swiss artist that has his paintings there.
It's John Armleder.
That's right, John Armleder.
Yeah, and there's also a Keith Haring, and there's a bunch of things. They actually
That's
add.
right. That's right.
The church is called Saint Eustache,
That's right.
and they had for since Napoleon actually they had this order of priests there called Oratorians, which is a little bit a sister order to the Jesuits. Very savvy priests, intellectuals,
Sure.
and they were always into art. So actually, every now and then, every like few years, there is another piece of art coming into the church. There is a new
At Saint Eustache.
at Saint Eustache. There is actually a new sculpture there since maybe 6 months that I saw recently.
Well, the church has actually been, the original patron for the arts, right?
Exactly.
If we go back and even now at the refurbished Notre Dame, the stained glass windows are made by Claire Tabouret. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating that it's always been there, and I guess in a way it's never left.
Exactly. No, I mean the art and music in the church is really something that is so important for the whole experience. The texts are incredible that we have. Then the arts, same thing, and in music too. And there have been so much great art created in the church.
And it all makes sense. I have this phrase whenever I'm really, really touched by any kind of art, whenever something's really, crosses into the sublime, I've always called it sort of touching the hand of God. There is this sort of quasi-religious experience when something touches you like you're beyond words.
Exactly. And that's the whole point. And that's why also the priests are very happy to have contemporary art, contemporary music, because it's like a point to touch the transcendental, to have a transcendental experience. It's something that you can't really grasp or can't really understand, which is the same thing with God. You cannot understand God.
Have you ever seen or read Dan Graham's book, Rock My Religion? There was this sort of idea that I think he was talking about the holy rollers.
Mhm.
I forget what denomination that is, but
Yeah.
speaking in tongues and this sort of thing, and
Yeah.
the kind of immense physical jubilation that you would see in some Baptist ceremonies. And he
Mhm.
compared that to the hardcore punk era in the 80s when Black Flag and other people of that era, Minor Threat and things like that, would play, and people would just completely lost in the experience, and
Yeah.
they would have this kind of like an out of body experience. They were beyond themselves and they were flailing all over the place. And it's funny how these two things that kind of seem to be completely separate actually do come together at some point.
Yeah, totally. That has always been the role of the music and the arts in religion, I would say.
You're not just at this one church. I understand that you did some work with the Berlin Philharmonic, correct?
Yeah, so basically, this is where I play, where I'm, as you actually said, resident organist. And then, so today I played a bunch of masses because it's Sunday. yesterday too, because it was Saturday. A usual week would be, there's no usual week, but then in the week it could be that I play in Munich on Wednesday for a concert, or I go somewhere else, I don't know, England or something. And I have a large number of projects with like concerts, either solo or with different collaborations that I have right now. So I'm often in different cities also playing. And when I'm not, if I'm away on a weekend, I have somebody who can substitute for me here.
And you're a composer as well.
Yeah. So I also come up with stuff. Yeah. Compose.
Well, what's really interesting is this sort of spans, what I want to say is time is going to be collapsing here from what I'm about to say. There's a classical component to all of this.
Mhm.
And also very, very contemporary and everything in between. Would you consider yourself a classical musician?
That's a difficult one because, I didn't start with classical music. I was playing the guitar, more like pop, rock, was jazz, everything. And then I came into the classical music a little bit later. People who studied classical music from the beginning, they had more luggage already. I had to kind of get into the classical music somehow, try to inhabit it somehow. And then I always felt that it wasn't only this. I was also interested in so many different things simultaneously. So I couldn't consider myself being just a classical musician or a rock musician. I have too much stuff going on. I don't have an answer to that question actually. I'm an artist in a bigger in a bigger scale or perspective.
Yeah, yeah. Well, at the end of the day, I guess your tool is a keyboard, right?
Yeah.
And that could be employed for like a synthesizer, or you could be making Aphex Twin, like post-electronic noise, or, it kind of could be anything at that point.
Yeah. And actually, I think this question wouldn't have been asked earlier because I think people basically only did contemporary music before. If you look back in history, Mozart or Beethoven, they were doing contemporary music of their time.
Mm-hmm.
And Schubert after them, and Stravinsky.
Yeah.
So there was. It's only later when you start to actually play all like dead composers too. Music was just fresh, and then you composed new music. It's only at this point where you start to go to conservatories and you play classical music, so to say, which would be then music from a period between 1750 to 1950 or something. And then that would be, it's more like a conservation, like a museum activity, actually. That's what one would call a classical musician. But if you think of Miles Davis, he was just playing jazz. And he was always evolving. Jazz players often disliked him because he was flirting with rock fusion in the 70s and then with pop music in the late 70s, early 80s. And then his last album called Doo-Bop, he's doing with this producer Easy Mo B, which was like a hip-hop producer. He worked with Biggie Smalls, everyone. So he was always just doing what he felt was fresh or new. And yeah, that's how I kind of see myself too. I play the organ, but I use everything I get my hands on that is somewhat from our time, like computers, distortion pedals, iPads, and then I do my version of everything that I digest around me.
Tell us about what you do in the art world. I was first introduced to you as an art collector.
Mm-hmm.
And this was, I don't know, at least 10 years ago, a little bit more. Tell us about your role as a collector and how that informs everything else you do.
I always had an interest in visual arts. And then I started to have a lot of friends who were artists. Once I started to make a little bit of money with my playing. When I could, I bought some works from my friends, basically. So it was not that I was thinking of becoming an art collector. It's always you buy something, then you buy something else, and then somebody say, "Oh, this guy is a collector." But it starts from an interest to live with these things. And then I realized that I could learn so much from these people and also the art to have it around me. Then I kind of accepted that I actually collected art at some point.
Were you in Sweden at the time, or is this the Paris chapter of your life?
It's Paris chapter, but I was already interested in art when I was younger. I bought some edition of an artist or something like this.
Did you grow up around art and music?
Yeah, because the art was because my father's best friend was a collector, and he kind of dragged me around to all the museums. Nobody else in the family was so interested, actually, not in his family either. So he kind of wanted to have somebody to drag around to.
Yeah, it's good to have a buddy.
Yeah, exactly. So got like kidnapped by him, and he said like, "Come and see this, and come and see this, and look what I bought, and this is awesome and stuff." He really got me into this. He really got me hooked. I had music around me because both my brothers, they were playing music when I was a kid, and one later became also a professional musician, but in a different field. But so music was always there.
Thank you for listening to Vita Brevis. If you know someone who would enjoy this conversation, please share it with them. A follow or review also goes a long way in helping us grow. Thank you. And remember, life is short, but art is forever.
And was MTV a part of your life?
Oh, dude.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, it's something that I always try. I don't know how to define this because it hasn't really been historicized correctly yet, I think.
MTV, you mean?
Yeah. My father, he was interested in tennis. So he, in Sweden, we didn't have any television. We had like the state TV only. But since he really wanted to see whatever Wimbledon or something, he bought this special antenna so he can watch TV. And me and my brothers, we didn't care about this, but we got MTV very, very early thanks to this. And then for somebody who hasn't seen this or who has grown up later, it's impossible to understand the scale of the influence of MTV. You had like so much good music in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Then MTV had its own kind of aesthetic visually also, was also very important. And then the music also kind of, you have different moments in history when, for instance, when pop songs, they became a certain length because you couldn't record more on a vinyl single.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have these like formats that actually shapes culture. And MTV really shaped everything. And then once it started to develop, you had this Yo MTV raps when rap was becoming more popular.
Yeah.
And kind of mainstream. And there was Headbangers Ball with...
I remember them all.
Yeah. This just has such an incredible impact. All the music that I digested through MTV, it's so much different things. It was everything from Kate Bush, who was big at the time. There was Eminem, who was popping at the time. There was, Aerosmith, Nirvana, also like huge part of this. And so this is a large part of my education and had helped my taste a lot, and many other people from my generation. You cannot say that it's rock, pop, or hip hop or anything. It's like so many different genres, but it was all encapsulated in this incredible television channel.
And growing up in Sweden, what about the whole Scandinavian black metal scene? Was this something that touched upon your youth at all?
Nothing, because that was in Norway. In Sweden, there were other bands, Europe, if you remember them.
Yeah,
there was Yngwie Malmsteen, who was from Sweden. There was a bunch of people who were from Sweden. But that was not as big as the dance music phenomenon that was starting then, and which my elder brother, who I mentioned, was part of. So they were early producers in the mid 80s, and they really popped in the 90s with producing for other artists. So my brother and his colleague, they had this duo called Rob and Raz, which they were huge in the early 90s also. But it's pre-internet. So I was looking actually a couple of months ago. It's not been historicized yet so much. So they were DJs, they started to produce music, and that was what many of these people did later. Then came Dennis Pop and Max Martin. and a bunch of other people. I knew some of them are dead or gone or something happened to them, but I knew all of them through my brother. So I was always hanging out with all these artists, also coming to Sweden to record with these studios, and it was a fascinating time, really. We didn't know how big it would be also.
Well, Sweden's very well known for its producers, right?
Yeah.
And these guys are behind the scenes, so they can have careers that last just decades.
Decades.
Yeah, they're never, in the video, so to speak.
Exactly, yeah. So they have the pros without the cons, so to say.
Yeah. I feel like we have to say something about ABBA, no?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a different generation, but we have something in Sweden actually that is called the Björn Borg effect. You know, sure. Björn Borg, the tennis player. Yeah. The concept of this idea is that, Scandis, they are very humble. They don't want to take space, or don't go run around and brag. So nobody really thinks they can do anything or be anything. That's how you grow up. And Björn Borg was the first tennis player who became the number one in the world from Sweden. What is described as the Björn Borg effect is that younger tennis players saw this and they said, if he can do it, I can do it too. And we had, after Björn Borg, a number of people like Stefan Edberg. I don't even know the names because I really don't care about tennis, but I know there was like 3, 4, maybe 5 that were in the top later for many, many years. And this happened also with the music. So I think that ABBA was important to just know that you can be from Sweden and you can have a musical career in the world.
Are there any famous Swedish artists that we know of? None come to mind off the top of my head.
Historically, yes, there are a couple, like Olle Bertling, who is an important artist working in the 50s, 60s, 80s. Uh-huh. There is, at later times, not so many visual artists had international careers.
Uh-huh. Eivind Folstrom?
Eivind Folstrom, yeah, of course, he's the most important post-war artist.
Okay, he's Swedish, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of like I guess it's a pop. Don't want to oversimplify it, but I know that there is a sort of colorful element to it, let's say.
Exactly. And he also conceptually was very important and very influential to other artists like Mike Kelly, for instance, who was heavily influenced by Eivind Folstrom.
I know that you've been close with Cory Arcangel for quite a while. Mm-hmm. He actually designed the cover for a book that I published years ago. I don't know if you remember that.
I have it. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yes. Collect digital video art. Yeah. So Cory gave us a set of instructions as he did back then. The Photoshop works, I guess they were called.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyhow, tell us about how you started with Cory Arcangel. I think you guys co-curated an exhibition recently. So tell us about that.
We met, like 15 years ago or something. I was a fan of his work already, and I knew that he actually studied musical composition, not art.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then I think we kind of hit it off because we had the same music influences, because he studied classical music, but he was same as me. He was grew up on Megadeth and Metallica, all the New York rap scene, LA, and also Detroit and techno, actually, which was also a great interest for both of us, and later Berlin. So we had this where we both felt close to popular culture and whatever you would say, like high art culture, fine arts culture. So I said, why don't you write something for the organ if you never did? And then he said, yeah, we have to work on this at some point. Then he had a piano piece for electric piano that he just wrote when we met, I guess. And then he got invited. I don't really remember how this happened, but I performed it. I did the European premiere of this piece in the Berlin Philharmonie. And then we played it a bunch of times together. And then in 2018, we did the first organ concert with a new piece by him, another piece of his that I arranged for the organ, and some other things. And from this, we got invited to curate a larger kind of thing in London, which we did in 2019 in the Art Night London. And we invited a bunch of people who wouldn't write for the organ, if we wouldn't have asked them. So we asked Charlemagne Palestine. I mean, he's playing the organ, but he's also an artist, but he made a piece. But we also had to bring those bears put it in front, like in the church, like an altar piece while we played his piece. We asked Haroon Mirza, the sculptor.
Yeah.
Who built a robot that he brought that actually played the organ. We asked Pierre Bismuth, who you might also know. He adapted some wallpaper to make scores out of them. Very interesting. So we had this. I think we had 10 or maybe 12 world premieres in this concert. Then we got invited to do this again in New York. And then COVID came. So this concert became more like a video work. Actually, we did a performance in a cell phone, like an iPhone.
Wow.
And so it became like a video work. And then we did another one in Düsseldorf because then we started to have so much, we work with this so much, we had more and more material ourselves. So then in Düsseldorf, we recorded also. I made one recording that became an album that came out last year. And we recorded a piece by Cory that will come out now this autumn in September, I think.
You're talking about Brace for Impact? Your solo album that you just released?
Yes.
Yeah, Brace for Impact. Is that the album you mentioned that came out last year?
Exactly. Yeah. So that came out last year. Then Cory's chord memory will come out this autumn. Now the latest iteration of this series became this show because a curator in Rome called Vittoria Bonifatti, she's running an art space called Villa Lontana, and she was very interested in what we have been doing over these years. So she wanted to kind of historicize the whole thing and invited us to do a show with all the ephemeral stuff that came out of this. So there is like all the scores, obviously, but there's also records. There is the bears from Charlemagne. We brought in this robot from Haroon. There is artworks from some of the people who are also visual artists. That's up now, actually, until September 19, 2026.
Oh, okay. Hidden Noise, it's called, right?
Hidden Noise, because this Hidden Noise became like because I had one piece called A Bruit Secret, which is this piece by Marcel Duchamp, where there is object inserted into like a closed box, and you can shake it and you hear something, but it was his friend who put in the object, so nobody knows what's inside, not even Duchamp. So we like this title, so now we call it like Hidden Noise, the whole series, and then the Rome iteration is called Sonnitus Occulti, Latin version of it. So we're kind of redigesting.
So this was a gallery exhibition with a lot of the ephemera related to the previous series of concerts and performances that you'd been doing for many, many years, it sounds like. What's interesting to me is your approach seems to be closer to that of, I guess it's curatorial, but it seems more interesting than that, where you're sort of using strategies that come from art making and working with artists to produce works for organs, essentially. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
It's really interesting, this idea of taking historical forms and sort of recontextualizing them or breathing new life into them so they can always stay relevant. When I was in college here in Central Texas, there was a band that was playing bluegrass music. They were called the Bad Livers. I mean, traditional bluegrass music. So a bass, a banjo, and a fiddle, okay? But they were hanging out with like the Butthole Surfers and Einstes and Nubaten, and they were playing Metallica songs and stuff like this.
Wow.
But it was fascinating because it was this very traditional music that I would guess most of the audience would just generally hate, but they made it relevant again. They sort of pushed a new context onto it, and it seems like this is a lot of what you're doing here.
When I quit the conservatory, I got my position here in Saint-Esprit. I was starting to immediately collaborate, do things with electronics and organ, stuff like this. And this was pretty early for this kind of stuff. So other organists, they looked upon me like some goofball doing all these things. I had to invent myself basically because there was nothing like this before. So I think that's where my encounter with Cory became so important, because he kind of had the same type of in with his art making, because he was making weird video stuff, modifying computer games, and then he showed this in an art space, and then it became an artwork, and then also most people, they came and they thought, is this some kind of a joke? I had this for many years, and I think that I had to kind of construct first of all, I had to construct myself. I couldn't call 5 other organists and say, do you want to be part of this thing where we'll experiment and stuff? Nobody was interested. So I had to get with people who were willing to experiment. I had to push this, even though nobody was interested really around me for many, many years. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there was no blueprint exactly for what I'm doing with some mentors, but I could have maybe other type of mentors that I could read about, or maybe Fluxus movement or things like this. And I kind of tried to create this of my own with the people around me. And now it's kind of fun, because now there is a generation that is younger than me, that are 10, 15, or sometimes even 20 years younger than me, playing the organ, experimenting in every way, doing super wild stuff. And for them, it's kind of easy. They can call me or send me a message and say, hey, well, what do you think about this? And blah, blah, blah. It's like you have somebody to talk to. With artists, I usually talk about these SWAT teams. The first person in the SWAT team who breaks in the door, he basically gets shot to death. And then you have the 2, 3 others that come in later, who are the heroes.
Well, that's the literal definition of an avant-garde. The avant-garde is like, it's the sort of tip of the spear.
With artists, you have this all the time. And the Jody also, right? The Dutch collective, Jody.org. Yeah. I mean, I'm often telling this story about them because they were so before everyone else. They're in 95, they were already, I mean, the work is still fresh from the 90s. And still today, every artist of my generation you talk to is like from this more experimental or digital art or experimental video art. It's like, who's your favorite artist? Jody. Who's your favorite artist? Jody. And it's just like everybody else is more famous than them because they were too early. It's not yet their time. They're the first person of the SWAT team.
They say it's often not the best to be the first to the market.
Yeah.
Just amazing stuff. And you mentioned these young kids. I just learned something recently this week. Domi and JD Beck. Have you heard these guys?
Oh, yeah, I heard them. Yeah, so it was a couple of years ago. They became this YouTube phenomenon among musicians. So people started to send stuff to each other, and they're so talented, both of them. They're insane, these people. I haven't followed. I don't know what happened to them after, but they were incredible.
They just landed in my feeds this last week, and I heard something about them on NPR. So yeah, things are going on. Like, I think they just released an album or something. And it sort of sounds like this weird hybrid between Frank Zappa and video game music. It's absolutely phenomenal. But Domi is Dominique, I imagine. She's French, and she's a keyboard player.
And the funny thing with the drummer, I saw this interview with him. Somebody asked, so who was your drum teacher? And he said, YouTube. I was like, what do you mean? Well, I was listening to something on YouTube with a drummer I liked, and then he learned how to play this. And then it was like, this algo just say, if you like this, you might like this video. Then he listened to that one. He learned how to play that. So he said that the YouTube algorithm was his teacher, basically. For our generation, that is such a fun thing to hear, because that I couldn't have any help from YouTube. It was too early. Did YouTube start in 2005 or something? It didn't become interesting until way later when there was some material.
Those things evolved quite a bit. But yeah, it was in the early aughts when that all came down, before they were acquired by Google and everything. So a couple of things I also wanted to bring up, and I think this is relevant to this part of the conversation. You pointed out something about that there's a lag between what happens in the sort of more traditional music world, where the art world is much more, let's go back to using the word avant-garde, where they might employ strategies that don't really find their place as far as influence is concerned until maybe, 10, 15 years afterwards. How does the use of technology in the art world sort of trickle down to influencing other spaces?
I would like to find an answer on this myself. I think, why does it seems like the mainstream audience, it's easier to see contemporary art that is more up to date, so to say, than a mainstream public listening to very up to date contemporary music. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a little bit, I guess in the art world, it's kind of in our DNA to be challenged, right? And that's sort of part of the rule of the game. And it's very easy for us, I think. We're kind of expecting that. Where I think people in, the sort of popular music field, it's more about finding a groove or chilling out or taking comfort in something as opposed to being unsettled, right?
Sure.
The art world kind of thrives on discomfort and challenging people. Yeah.
And also sensation a little bit. So you have like hype around something. And my guess was always that it's not durational. So you could go and see something. If you like it or not, it's not going to be that painful because you will leave. Whereas with music, it's durational. So you just have to sit through 1.5 hours or something. And it might not be possible.
No, that's a good point. And now going back to we were talking about MTV earlier, those were little 3-minute clips. But now because of TikTok and Instagram and things like this, like our attention spans are even shorter now.
Yeah.
We all want that, 10-second dopamine hit and then on to the next one, on to the next one.
Yeah.
It's very hard for artists, I think, to kind of penetrate that wall of indifference, so you kind of have to be spectacular.
Yeah.
So music and art, technology, any kind of human evolution has to be prodded into existence. There has to be a deliberate action to kind of push forward for new things. And in the short term, they can be very uncomfortable and weird and awkward, but if they eventually sort of, find their home and people can sort of adopt them into, sort of mainstream culture. I just find it interesting for someone like yourself who's at this sort of thinking about, the tip of the spear of, very experimental art forms, art and music, which is, your primary domains, and where they overlap is also kind of fuzzy. It's really interesting. And I think you have to make peace with having a sort of limited audience for this sort of thing. Would I be wrong to assume that?
No, I think that's fine. And also stuff like this, it takes time before it gets accepted. Also, if you see like the accepted music or arts or whatever you like as a circle, then you would have something pop up outside this circle. If it's a little bit outside the circle will enlarge itself until it will also encompass this external dot, so to say. If you have something that is too far out from this circle, it will take longer, and you will have to have something maybe that is influenced from this, that can drag this into the mainstream audience. Have you read Arthur Danto's book about the Brillo box by Warhol? So
of course I know what you're talking about, but yeah, go on, tell us about it.
He kind of theorizes around this, that because Warhol had this, since he was working in advertisement when he was younger, he really understood the public, what they could take, what they could not, etc., and what they were ready for. And the Brillo box was presented really at the one moment where this could have been accepted. Would it have been 5 or 10 years earlier, it wouldn't have made sense.
Yeah.
The mainstream audience, I mean, I always say mainstream audience now since 10 minutes, but it's actually it's already an expertise audience in arts or in music or whatever you're talking about, literature or cinema. But you can only go so far out and kind of get some acceptance. So this is always taking time before it becomes, so to say, mainstream. However, I never thought of anything I'm doing as I don't feel it's experimental for me. For me, this is my language that has been developed throughout many, many years of experimenting, even though I didn't want to say experiment, but being like trying out different things, so many influences, music, popular culture, experimental cinema and art, literature, etc., or poetry. And then all of this goes into my kind of mill in the brain, and I feel that what I do is it's a very natural language for me right now. But it's going to take some time, maybe before other people's going to feel that this is something normal.
What sort of advice would you give for non-artists in terms of being unafraid to experiment and take risks in order to evolve whatever it is activity that you do?
You should only compete where you have an edge. And I think my edge is that I have a very wide scope of influences that I have really appropriated. When I do something that is influenced by some electronic music or so, it's inhabited already. It's not something that I glue on to make it sound cool or so. It's really in my work. And I think the most important is that this sounds like really common knowledge, but you really have to be yourself and only compete where you have an edge. You know this story with Bill Gates when he was a kid because he wanted to be a mathematician. And he was at Harvard, I think, but there were two other kids who were just a little bit better than him. So he understood that he could never be the best, and he really needed to be the best in the world. So when he was also working with writing software with his friend, he realized that here he could be the best in the world, and and so he could compete with where there was less competition. Just do something that nobody else was doing. Competition is for losers. If you're competing, you're actually just not unique enough. Then you're just trying to compete with others who are already doing more or less the same thing. But you should be really somewhere where you don't have any competition at all.
Carve your own path.
Exactly.
I think that's a great place for us to stop. Hampus Lindwall, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to have you on. I look forward to many, many challenging projects from you in the years to come.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.